When Meghan Markle walked onto the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, there was anticipation in the air. It had been months since her last major appearance. The public was eager to hear her speak, maybe even laugh, after so many months of headlines, documentaries, and polarized opinions. Meghan, dressed in an elegant yet understated black suit, gave off her usual calm aura, the kind that mixes diplomacy with vulnerability. Stephen Colbert greeted her warmly, smiling wide. But there was an edge to his tone from the very beginning, a sort of rehearsed sharpness that didn't go unnoticed. The opening questions were light, as expected. Meghan smiled, laughed, even joked about her dogs and her son's love of chickens. But then Colbert made a sudden pivot that many in the room didn't see coming. "Meghan," he said, "you've spoken so much about being misunderstood, but have you ever considered that maybe... some of that misunderstanding comes from how perfectly curated everything seems?" The crowd chuckled awkwardly, and Meghan's expression shifted just slightly, but enough to signal something deeper had cracked open. She responded with composure. I think it's fair to say we all curate parts of ourselves, especially when your life has been turned into a public narrative without your consent." Colbert nodded but continued, "Sure, but when you produce a multi-million-dollar docuseries, publish a best-selling memoir, and do global interviews, some might argue you're not running from the narrative, you're directing it." Meghan's smile faded a bit. "Telling your story is very different from being reduced to someone else's version of it," she replied, but Colbert didn't back off. "Okay, but doesn't it get blurry? You've been a critic of press intrusion and toxic media, but you've also signed major deals with the same corporations that thrive off that attention." The audience was dead silent now, unsure whether this was still late-night entertainment or something far more raw. Meghan inhaled slowly and said, "There's a difference between having control and being exploited. We chose to speak on our terms, but her voice had already thinned. The sparkle in her eyes wasn't shining, it was holding back something else. Colbert leaned back, arms crossed, and pressed again. "But don't you think the public has a right to feel confused? When you say you value privacy, but then show your home, your children, your emotional traumas on camera, it's bound to raise questions." That was the line. Meghan's face, still calm, now looked wounded. She blinked rapidly, then said, "There's a difference between privacy and secrecy. Telling my story isn't about exposure, it's about reclaiming." Her voice cracked just enough to hear the strain. "You think people want to hear the truth from someone like me? A woman, biracial, divorced, American, married into royalty? Every part of that makes someone hate me before I've even opened my mouth." The crowd clapped hesitantly. Colbert, sensing the discomfort, tried to lighten the mood, but it was too late. Meghan's hand moved to the edge of her chair. Her posture was still composed, but her expression said she was holding back everything that had threatened to overflow for months. Her fingers trembled just slightly, and the room felt like it had completely stopped breathing. Stephen tried to shift back towards safer ground, offering a compliment about her charity work, but the damage was done. Meghan wasn't interested. In grace-saving transitions, "You invited me here to talk," she said softly, "but it doesn't feel like a conversation. It feels like an ambush." Colbert stiffened. "I ask the questions people want answers to," he replied. Meghan looked straight at him, eyes glassy but defiant. "Then maybe people should ask better questions." That line-cutting, honest, and heartbreakingly quiet landed with a weight the studio couldn't recover from. There was no witty "Come back" from Stephen, no applause from the audience. Silence. Meghan sat there, her eyes now visibly teary, and for a moment, even the cameras hesitated. She reached for her water, sipped slowly, and said, "I've lived years now wondering what version of me the world would believe. I didn't expect this show to make me question it again." That wasn't a dramatic moment, it was a breakdown. In real time, one cloaked in calm, but unraveling on every level. Stephen, trying to recover, leaned in gently. "I don't mean to attack you, Meghan, truly. I'm just trying to understand what your journey has meant for others." She nodded but didn't smile. "It's meant I've been picked apart in ways most people wouldn't survive, but I don't say that for sympathy. I say that because I'm still here." The room erupted in applause again, but now it felt different. Not enthusiastic, but apologetic. Colbert rubbed his forehead, visibly uncomfortable. I guess I pushed. Too far, he muttered into his mic. Meghan gave a half shrug. Or maybe I let myself believe I'd finally be heard for who I am, not what I represent to everyone else. She wiped a single tear from her eye, not dramatically, not performatively. Just a quick, human motion. And in that second, she wasn't a duchess, or a public figure, or a controversy. She was just a woman. Exhausted from having to explain her right to be seen as one. Asterisk, the internet exploded almost instantly after the show aired. Hashtags like Meghan and Colbert, she deserves better, and hashtag Colbert goes too far trended globally. The clip of Meghan holding back tears, softly defending herself, circulated faster than any PR team could react. Commentators on all sides of the spectrum weighed in. Some defended Stephen Colbert, saying he was doing his job and asking tough but fair questions. Others condemned him outright, saying he crossed a line, that what he did wasn't journalism, it was entertainment disguised as scrutiny. Piers Morgan jumped in, predictably, with smug comments. Serena Williams posted a quiet but powerful tweet. Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's what holds the tears back. And Oprah, without naming names, reposted a quote. There's nothing stronger than a woman who remains soft in a world that keeps trying to harden her. The moment had left a mark, and not just on Meghan, on everyone watching. Asterisk, the next day, Colbert opened his show with an awkward attempt at clarification. Last night's conversation with Meghan Markle struck a nerve. That wasn't the intention. I believe in open dialogue, but I also believe in empathy. His tone was serious, but the damage had already fractured his image with many viewers. Meghan, on the other hand, released no statement. No tweet, no interview, no rebuttal. Her silence felt louder than any explanation could have been. That silence became a conversation in itself, an unspoken reminder that not every wound needs words to be validated. The power of restraint, of not feeding the fire, resonated with women across the world. The segment became the most rewatched clip of Colbert's year, but not for the reasons producers hoped. It wasn't funny, it wasn't revealing, it was sobering. A rare look at what happens when someone asks for dignity and gets dissected instead. Asterisk, behind the scenes. Producers scrambled. Some insiders claimed the tone of the interview hadn't been approved beforehand, that Colbert had gone off script. Others said Meghan's team had been assured the conversation would center around her charitable work and recent children's initiatives. Whether or not that's true, the aftermath suggested a clear betrayal of trust. Hollywood stars, politicians, and even fellow late-night hosts began quietly distancing themselves. A week later, Jimmy Fallon brought up the incident without naming names, saying if someone's telling their truth, maybe don't treat it like a punchline. The crowd applauded. By then, Meghan had already returned to California, out of sight but not out of mind. A few blurry photos surfaced of her in Montecito walking hand-in-hand with Harry, but she said nothing. Still the silence echoed, louder than the loudest monologue on television that week. Asterisk for Meghan. The interview wasn't just a media moment. It was a breaking point. Not the kind where someone collapses, but the kind where someone stops trying to convince the world they're worthy of gentleness. And in that vulnerability, people saw something they didn't expect. Strength and stillness. In the face of sharp questions, she didn't yell. She didn't storm off. She didn't fire back. She cried, and that was more powerful than any counterattack could have been. Viewers, especially women of color, wrote essays, filmed response videos, and shared their own stories of being interrogated under the guise of curiosity. Meghan had held a mirror to the world not because she tried to, but because the world couldn't look away when her smile broke. It wasn't her words that started a movement. It was her silence, her cracked voice, and the moment she looked into the camera as if to say, "Are you watching? This is what it costs." Asterisk Colbert may have meant to provoke a memorable conversation, but what he provoked was a reckoning. Meghan left that stage more exposed than ever, but not diminished. If anything, the aftermath only made her narrative more undeniable. She had been questioned, cornered, and subtly mocked on national TV. And she'd walked out with her dignity intact. And Stephen. He faced the harshest critic of all, the mirror. For Meghan Markle, it was another chapter in a long, exhausting story of visibility, scrutiny, and grace under fire. But for those watching, it was a moment that redefined what strength looks like on screen. Not perfection, not defiance, but a woman, sitting still, as the world tries to turn her into a spectacle and refusing to let the tears define her,